Welcome back, everyone. It is Eric from Rare Candy, and today we're going to be checking out what's been winning in Japan for the month of September. Now, the big new additions that we've seen over in Japan this past month have been the release of the new Raging Surf set, as well as the Skeledirge and Mewtwo EX starter decks. So for that reason, we're going to focus a little bit more on the results from the end of the month, since that's when these new cards did get released. But if you guys want to see all of the winning decks for the entire month, I will be sure to have links down below in the description to our friends here at PokemonCard.io, where they do a great job of compiling these tournament results on a weekly basis. So huge shout out to them for making this video possible. But also, one thing we need to keep in mind today is that these are going to be local shop tournaments. These are going to be like closer to a league challenge or a league cup. These are not going to be like giant 3,000 person events or anything like that. So just something to keep in the back of our mind as we are combing through these deck lists today. But before we get into the actual list themselves, just be sure to smack that like button for me, feed that always hungry YouTube algorithm. And also, if you missed it, some new merch just dropped over at rarecandytcg.com. And I know I'm a little biased here, but I've got to say, I absolutely love the way this playmat design came out. All of the pre-orders have finally shipped out, and now these are going to be available, like I said, over on the Rare Candy online store. Feel free to head over to rarecandytcg.com or use that link down below in the description if you do want to pick one up and help support the channel in the process. But with that being said, let's check out some of these winning deck lists for the month of September. Before we get into some of these new archetypes like the Garchomp EX or the Gholdengo or Gholdengo. Not sure how we pronounce that Pokemon, so feel free to correct me down below in the comment section if you want. But before we get to those, we're going to check out some of these existing archetypes that got some updates from this newest set. So the big new card that's going to be slotting into a lot of decks, of course, is going to be this little Jirachi down here. So Jirachi, of course, is the big Sableye killer, or, theory has it at least, but has the ability where it prevents your opponent's basic Pokemon from placing damage counters on your bench. So yeah, that's going to fix, in theory at least, like I said, your matchup for a lot of these single prize decks. So take a deck like Zoroark Toolbox, which is a deck that is near and dear to my heart. This is a deck that previously just got bodied by Lost Zone decks, but now with Jirachi and Manaphy, we actually have some pretty good bench protection against those pesky sniping Pokemon out there. Now, it also looks like they have updated their list with some new attackers as well, or new attacker, I should say. They have the Lantern over here, which I'm not super crazy about, if I'm being honest, though. It does 200 if it has a water energy attached, so you wait till you're behind, use reversal energy to power it up. But honestly, I think Raichu is probably just better most of the time. It's only a single energy, but it looks like they're just trying out some of the new cards from Raging Surf, seeing what's good, seeing what's not. As someone who considers themselves, a slight authority figure on Zoroark Toolbox, I definitely would build this list a little bit different. I'm not crazy about the trekking shoes. I think there's some other attackers they could probably play in here, but Jirachi I think is the big takeaway. I think we could build this list a lot differently otherwise, but yeah, with Jirachi in the mix, you might finally be safe from those pesky Sableyes. So similarly, another deck that I think people are really excited to dust off once we get this Jirachi is going to be United Wings. Now, I will say right up front, I think this deck probably also has to worry about Iron Hands, which of course has not released in Japan just yet. So I think the jury's still out if United Wings is going to be viable after Paradox Rift comes out. But for the moment in Japan, this deck seems pretty good. I'm not going to lie, because now Jirachi fixes what has been your worst matchup, which of course has been Lost Zone decks, because Sableye can just take like double KOs on your Watch Rolls and your Murkrows. I really like how they have the double Manaphy as well, really protects you from the canceling Cologne play against Qianpao. And actually, the more that I'm thinking about it too, the Jirachi also really helps against Gardevoir as well, because now they can't go like Boss Kirlia, Cresselia, your attacker, behind it. And Medicham V actually can't knock out your Pokemon either now. I mean, they can still do weird stuff with like Radiant Alakazam to knock out Jirachi. I don't know, even against Rapid Strike, it doesn't seem that awful, I've got to say. But yeah, I'm really excited to dust off United Wings. Like I said, I think the jury is still out if this deck can deal with Iron Hands in the format. But against everything else, I think United Wings is shaping up to be pretty decent. So next up, we have a Gardevoir list, which is, I think a no-brainer to include Jirachi. The Lost Zone decks have always been some of the more annoying decks for your Gardevoir decks to deal with. So Jirachi's going to help there. Also really good against the mirror match to deal with opposing Cresselias, and also to shut off Medicham V against Rapid Strike. So Jirachi just fits absolutely perfectly in Gardevoir. and I'm really excited to actually dust off Gardevoir. I haven't played it in a while. They also do have the, I forget the name of it, but the new Moonlight Stadium thingamajig. It's like the promo card in Japan that will probably be in Paradox Rift. But from what I could tell, it looked like maybe 75% of Gardevoir lists in Japan have been playing this. There was a couple that were forgoing it, but it definitely makes some sense. If you guys need a refresher on it, you discard a Psychic from your hand and heal 30 from each of your Pokemon. It kind of ties into Jirachi a little bit in terms of just helping prevent your opponent from spread and like snipe Pokemon on your field, but also it kind of helps you be a little bit more aggressive at times, most notably with the baby Guardy, because of course Guardy is like hard capped at only accelerating 6 energy at a time to it due to its 140 HP, but with the Moonlight Stadium you can heal 30 and be able to accelerate an additional energy with Gardevoir EX, and that could allow you to take KOs on like V-Star and some of those Pokemon that are like just right outside your damage range sometimes with your baby Guardy. But other than that, guys, the list hasn't changed too much. Probably doesn't need to. Gardevoir's still great. But next up, we're finally getting into some of the new archetypes, which I know is what everyone wants to see here. And we're going to start with Gholdengo. Gholdengo. Feel free to correct me in the comments. I don't know the proper way to pronounce this guy, so I'm just going to go with Gholdengo for the moment. But we have a few different lists here for this guy, and this one's going to be probably one of the most different of the ones that I was seeing pop up. This is going to be one that is playing the Luxray here, where if it's your opening hand or if it's in your opening hand, you can choose to start the game with it. So it gives you a potential like early game attacker while you're setting up your stage ones. So it's pretty cool. I think it does 50 and you search your deck for 2 trainer cards or 2 items. I think it is actually. And just in general, the whole engine of this deck is really interesting. They have like the worker as their only supporter of the deck. There's no boss's orders. They're just playing the cross switchers. And it looks like they're just going all in on the sort of Pokestop engine that they have here, because very rarely you're going to mill cards that you don't want to actually get off Pokestop, because the majority of this deck is items. You can also maybe toss away your excess copies of Luxray with Pokestop, but also with Ultra Ball and Superior Energy Retrieval. So yeah, there's actually, I think, a pretty good bit of synergy here in this whole engine. But the Gholdengo, of course, is the star of the show. If you guys need a refresher on it, its ability says you can draw a card, but if it's in the active spot, you can draw 2 instead. And its attack, you discard any number of energy from your hand, and it does 50 for each one that you discard. Though I will say, I'm not crazy about the 3 count of Gholdengo. I kind of want to see a 4th one, just because you don't mind having all 4 Gholdengos in play at any given point, and it's your only attacker, really. So other than that, I think the deck looks kind of cool. I'm not sure if this is the right way to play Gholdengo or not, but definitely the most unique out of the ones we're going to look at today. Okay, so next up we have, I think, a more standard sort of idea for Gholdengo. They're going to be playing Kirlia as their like engine of choice or support Pokemon of choice. But another inclusion I really do like in the deck is the Basculegion. Like, I think playing Basculin already does make a good bit of sense, just because it will help get your Gimme Ghouls in play a little bit easier. But Basculegion actually has an attack that does synergize pretty well here. So it's 0 energy and does 20 times the amount of basic energies in your discard pile, and you shuffle them back into your deck. So this can give you a decent like 1 prize attacker to pivot into at some point. And it also sets your deck back up to be able to, you know, hit for a lot of damage with Gholdengos on future turns, especially if you had to like toss away some superior energy retrievals at some point and you're starting to run out of steam. This guy could be a way to sort of, you know, refuel a little bit for your deck. I will say it's a little bit weird not to see Manaphy or Jirachi in here. I would have expected at least Manaphy in the deck, just to protect against like a turn 2 like Greninja sniping play. But looking at the trainer cards, we do see a pretty big difference between this deck and the last one too. Whereas they're only playing the workers, we have a much more sort of traditional engine that we have here. But I will say, I'm actually not sure what supporters I like best for this archetype yet, because like the issue with the deck is I feel like Research is kind of a difficult card to play, because you want to keep your energies in your hand to fuel your attacks. And Research is going to dump your hand. So if you have a bunch of energy in hand, you can't really play a supporter at that point. I think I still need some hands-on time here to figure out like what's the best way we should probably build a list like this. And for our final Gholdengo list, this is actually probably my favorite of the bunch, just at a glance here. I think there's some cool things going on here. It's cut a little bit of the fat that's in the last list that we just looked at, but still is based around having like a stage 1 support Pokemon. Here they have the Burrell instead of the Curly Engine. They still have the Basculegion, all that good stuff, and still no Manaphy or Jirachi. I want to point that out. So it seems like these Gholdengo players just don't think they're going to need it. Not sure if that's correct, but one thing I do like about this deck is the inclusion of Fog Crystal and Psychic Energy into the list, which seems odd at a glance, but Gholdengo doesn't actually care if you discard Metal Energy. It just says Basic Energy. So that does open up some cool deck building options to where you can now play Fog Crystal to not only get your basic setup and into play, but also in the mid game, it acts as a way of getting energy out of your deck too. So I think that is a really cool idea. Another card of interest here is Grusha. This is a card we don't see too often, but could make sense. I'm a little bit torn on it, but you draw until you have 5 cards. But if none of your Pokemon have energy, you draw until you have 7 instead. So I think the thinking here is Gholdengo, it only attacks for a single energy. So you can sort of hang on to that extra energy and use Grusha to get an extra card or 2 in the process. A part of me does wish these past 2 lists would play some sort of copies of a card like Worker or Avery, just because I think those sort of draw 3 effects are really good for a deck like this that is just expanding its hand size constantly. Or even a supporter like Zinnia actually doesn't seem like it could be that bad here. But my knee-jerk reaction is that these standard supporter lines with Research Iono Boss aren't gonna jive completely in a deck like this, but we'll have to see which of these Gholdengo ideas is going to do the best as time goes on. Right now the format is very much so in its infancy over there. I think this last one might be my favorite of the 3 personally though. Next we have Mewtwo EX, and this is a card that's not actually in Raging Surf, but it came out in a starter deck alongside of the set. But it's paired up with Xatu here, and it's kind of like they just separated Shadow Rider Calyrex into 2 different cards. But I think the big reason to play this over something like Shadow Rider is the fact that you can actually play Path in the deck. So Xatu's ability here is almost identical, but actually a little bit better than Shadow Rider's. So much like with that card, you accelerate a Psychic Energy from hand to one of your bench Pokemon, but it's not exclusive to Psychic like Shadow Rider's was, which means we can power up Mewtwo EX with this card here. And then Mewtwo has Shadow Rider's attack where it's 10 plus 30 for each of your Psychic Energy in play. So we're just trying to, I guess, swarm a ton of energy into play, take big KOs with Mewtwo. Seems pretty good. And also the first attack on Mewtwo EX, not too bad either, I want to point out. I believe you accelerate 2 Psychics from discard to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So this is actually not a bad attack to lead the game with too. Got a Mew EX, we got a Cresselia here. This is going to be the Cresselia that accelerates energy, not the Moonglow reverse one. Say Bravery Charm, this makes sense. It's going to make Mewtwo basically a V-Star Pokemon, really. So it's going to push up to 280 HP. We got Path to the Peak, like I said. I think this is the real incentive to play this over Shadow Rider, is Shadow Rider always just got bodied by any deck that would play Path. Ooh, and the reversal energy is kind of cute here too. I didn't even think about this because I guess you can power up your Mewtwo's with your Xatu's and then use your attachment for turn on like a Xatu or something. So if you're behind on prizes, you can actually get like a 90 damage buff by attaching this instead of a Psychic. A part of me wants to see like another switching card in the deck just because I think Xatu is only accelerating to bench Pokemon like with Shadow Rider. So I kind of do want to see an escape rope or another switching card of some sort here. But yeah, I think the general idea here is something that could be worth messing with. Okay, next up we have what I think is a really cool archetype. That's going to be Aegislash. So this is a card that I even said in my Raging Surf first impressions, that is a card that I don't think people should sleep on. I think a lot of people are going to look at this card and say, well, it's just a stage 2 version of Mimikyu, so why would I play that? And it largely is, but there are some benefits to Aegislash over Mimikyu. So it has the same ability where it prevents damage from EXs and Vs, but you have a lot more HP as opposed to Mimikyu, which means you can actually sometimes tank a hit from some of the different Shred Pokemon and some of these single prize Pokemon that can get through that ability. And also you have a better attack. So the attack is Shred, it's just 120, goes through any effects. But I think the card in particular that makes Aegislash interesting is actually the new Gorgeous Mantle tool card. So new tool card, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called at least. and it increases your HP by 100 on non-rule box Pokemon, but they give up one more prize whenever they're knocked out. So this is definitely kind of a costly trade-off, but if you're an Aegislash that's rarely getting knocked out by most decks, giving up an extra prize could be worth it, since a lot of the times if you're playing against a deck that doesn't play like good single prize attackers, they're usually having to do weird things like power up their Burrell and try to attack you with that and do weird stuff like that. And the 100 extra HP definitely could be worth it, I could see. So you'd be at 250 HP, which is pretty insane. That means you're actually going to take a hit from even Mewtwo Max and Giratina V. That being said, I don't know if you're still beating those decks without some additional tech card inclusions, but you're definitely a lot closer than you would be otherwise. Of course, they have the Jirachi to protect against Sableye. Reversal Energy, that seems pretty cool. We got Burrell as the draw engine here. I think this card over here is Arven. You can grab your rare candy and you can also grab your gorgeous mantle, or it looks like they're also playing Vengeful Punch. So definitely some very annoying tool cards that they're running here. And so next up, we're finally getting into Garchomp EX, which is going to be the final new archetype that we're going to be looking at. And this is probably, I think, the most common way that we're seeing people build around Garchomp in Japan. I have to say, this actually might even be my favorite. I think before this set came out, some people were thinking about pairing Garchomp, myself included, with like Ting Lu and Koraidon and stuff like that. And honestly, I don't know why I never thought of Lucario. This just seems way better than ideas like that. But the Garchomp, if you guys need a refresher on it, stage 2, its first attack for a single fighting energy does 160, and you accelerate 3 fighting, I believe, from your discard to your benched Pokemon. So you can swing with Garchomp, power up your next Garchomp if you want to, or you can accelerate 3 energies to Lucario over here. And I think that's where things get a little bit spicy, because with its attack here, you discard all your fighting energy attached to it, and it does 10 plus 60, I believe it is, for each one you discarded. So if you accelerate 3 to it, you attach for turn and accelerate 1, you have 5 energy, right? So you're doing 310 if you discard all of its energy. It also covers its weakness. Garchomp is weak to lightning, so if you do run against a Miraidon deck, you can actually maybe even avoid setting up Garchomp altogether and just dealing, or just use Lucario instead. Or of course, if you face off against Iron Hands EX whenever that comes out too, Lucario is going to give you an answer for that. And it's only a single prize Pokemon. So I think this deck in general is sort of my ideal playstyle as a player. Like, it's a true attacking stage 2 deck. It's not like a fake stage 2 deck like Baxcalibur, where it just sits on your bench doing nothing, just making your deck less consistent for no reason. You're actually attacking with Garchomp, and you actually have other evolution Pokemon that you can attack with and have as support Pokemon. So yeah, the other thing I do like about this archetype in general is just the engine, because it's largely a water deck, which means you have access to Irida, because now you can grab Candy plus Garchomp off Irida, or of course you can grab your Manaphy, your Radiant Greninja. But we do have some other ways of building Garchomp we're going to take a look at. We have this one here, which actually reminds me a bit of how people were attempting to build Superior V-Star when that card was coming out. So if your opponent does swing on your Garchomp and doesn't knock it out, you can use something like Cheryl to just heal off the energy, reattach a fighting, then accelerate the energy you just discarded back out of your discard pile. And also they have the Altaria here, which is the one that moves damage counters. So if they swing on your Garchomp and they don't knock it out, you can just retreat into Altaria, move all the damage off your Garchomp onto your opponent's active. But another card I do want to at least shout out that I think is cool in the list is the Terrakion here. I forget the name of this attack, but it is pretty cool. It does 120 and prevents, I think, all damage done to it on the next turn, but you can't use the attack multiple turns in a row. But still a cool effect. It's actually could be really cool against something like an Iron Hands or Miraidon or, you know, what have you. But the issue that I think this deck is going to have is that in the short term, I think we just have too many cards that can still one-shot Garchomp. Like, Lost Zone decks are still going to be playing Raikou V. Miraidon obviously is going to one-shot you. Iron Hands is going to one-shot you. Even Giratina V-Star with Star Requiem. Gardevoir EX. So I think this type of build for Garchomp makes sense, but is just poorly positioned in what looks to be, the format after Raging Surf and Paradox Rift releases here. And so we have one final Garchomp list we're going to take a look at. This one is with Lycanroc EX, which is something I honestly didn't really think too much of. But Garchomp does sort of fix its big issue it's always had, is that it's had a pretty unmanageable attack cost for a somewhat underwhelming payoff, I guess. But the Lycanroc does 140, and then if it's knocked out, your opponent takes 10 damage counters. And the math here actually does work out pretty well with Garchomp. If Garchomp swings for 160, and then let's say like a Giratina or, what have you, comes in and knocks out your Garchomp, well, Lycanroc can actually clean up that KO pretty well there. And then if it gets knocked out, that sets up the math for your next Garchomp to come in. Also have the Vengeful Punch in the deck too, to sort of, I think, just clean up your math a little bit for certain situations where it might not perfectly work out. But they do also have the Baby Lycanroc. This one is 240 minus, I think, 80 for every energy your opponent has on their active. Yeah, you're probably not swinging for 242 often, but I think this is more so just to give your deck some sort of single prize option for at some point. And the only other card I want to point out is what I think is going to be 2 copies of Cheryl down here. It's kind of hard to tell because of the glare. But it looks like it's a promo Cheryl card. Feel free to correct me if I'm seeing wrong, but I think it is, just because it makes sense with Garchomp, like we just said for the last list. But that's going to round out today's video for our final deck list we're checking out. Out of all these new deck lists, I'm probably most excited to try out the Garchomp, as you could probably tell earlier. Specifically the Lucario version, that's definitely the one that speaks to me the most currently. But I definitely want to hear from you guys down below in the comment section. Which of these new decks are you most excited for? But if you guys do enjoy this Japanese tournament coverage, feel free to leave a like on the video. And if you're feeling a little extra generous, you can always become a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg or pick up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.